Welcome to this edition of On the Legal Side. Today we want to bridge a subject that we have talked about in the past, and this is a subject that may not sit too well with company owners. Some of my listeners, of whom are supervisors, and others who are managers or investors in businesses. But today, the topic of this program is called Aftermath. With the number of active and mass shootings happening across the country, we're seeing many employees at all levels injured, killed, and suffering long after the shooting has stopped. We have seen firsthand the psychological and physical damage that active shooters leave behind long after they're gone. Private Officer International, from time to time, receives emails from both members and non-members asking what their rights are. Do employees have any rights related to a mass shooting incident? Teachers, retail employees, and those who are working in other industries all do have certain rights, and employers have certain obligations. And we don't like to think about a active shooting incident or a mass shooting incident happening at our business, but the reality is, regardless of what type of business it is, it's not shielded from these type of events happening. They can happen anytime and anywhere. So employees want to know now more than ever, do they have rights? What are the obligations of the employer? The answer to the question is not as clear-cut as I would hope that it would be. The answer to the question depends on many different factors, such as, was there negligent conduct on the part of the employer or any third parties involved? Was the employee injured, critically wounded? Was the shooting relative to an internal situation involving another coworker, an employee of the same business? What was the motivation of that shooter? And what type of relief is now being sought by the worker, by the employee? Are they looking for $1 million? Are they looking for a quick cash settlement? Or do they just want to have medical care? Do they just want to have some type of psychological care? Are they just looking for the bare minimum? So what are your rights overall as an employee involved in a mass shooting incident? And this is today covering anyone and everyone: security officers, retail employees, McDonald's workers, it doesn't matter. This is the law. So in almost all states now, employers must carry workers' compensation. So your first contact after the incident for any type of care will be through your employer's workers' compensation insurance, WC insurance. This is an insurance provided by the employer, paid for by the employer, not the employee. And most states, by law, require employers with at least 5 employees, and in some states, with 1 employee, to have this type of coverage. And if you're working for a major company of any sort, they most certainly will have this in place. What does workers' compensation do for you? Let's start off with an employee injured on the job. If you've been injured in any type of situation, but especially in an active shooter incident, if you've had to be taken to the hospital, even just to be checked out, workers' compensation will cover all of those expenses. They will cover the ambulance. Well, I was life flighted by a helicopter and my bill is $36,000. They will cover that as well. Workers' compensation will also pay any rehabbing. If you have to go through some type of rehab, if you have to be at home to recuperate for a month, 2 months, 3 months, they will also pay for that. Any medical expenses, any medications, any special medical equipment, such as a walker, crutches, anything of that nature, they will cover that 100%. Workers' comp will cover a percentage of lost wages. Let's say that you make $500 a week, and in your state, it will cover 70%. So that is $350 a week. Yes, you're going to lose out on some of your income. But workers' comp will cover a portion of your weekly salary. As long as a doctor whose care you are under says you cannot return to work, then you will be paid through workers' comp insurance. That's not a decision for the employer to make. That is a decision for the insurance provider to make. As long as your injuries sustained in an active shooting incident is covered through workers' compensation, then the employer generally will be immune from any type of lawsuits. But we're going to get into that aspect as well. And this is where business owners, especially those who are a member of Private Officer International, get a little uneasy. But it is the reality that sometimes you have to go a step further. Workers' compensation in many states also will pay a one-time death payout to the family should an employee be killed at work on the job to no fault of their own. In most states, it's a one-time payout of between $10,000 and $25,000 for funeral expenses. Workers' compensation insurance all begins by filling out the proper documents, which your HR, Human Resource Department, should do for you. If you work at a smaller company and they don't have their own HR department, then it would be a manager or the owner of the business. Make sure that if you're ever involved in a workers' comp work-related injury, that you document everything that happened, write it down, take photos, take video, and get copies of every document. So when you fill out, or when the employer fills out the original claim, the original injury report, make sure that you get a copy of that. You go to the hospital, you go to the doctor, you have follow-up medical care. Under HIPAA, the Health Insurance Information Portability and Accountability Act, the federal law allows the patient, you, to receive a copy of not only all medical records, but all x-rays or any other documents, everything that a medical provider, a hospital, a doctor, or even a pharmacy has in your file, you can receive a copy of. It's important that you maintain all of your documents, all of the copies of the EOBs, those are explanation of benefits that are provided through the insurance company, showing what they were paying and what has paid and what hasn't paid. In this case, where an employee is injured on the job, everything, 100%, should be paid, and you should not have to worry one iota about any of your bills. They should be covered 100%. Once the employer has filled out the proper paperwork and notified their carrier that covers workers' comp, once the claim is approved, then in some states there's going to be a delay on your first payment. Those delays could range from 10 to 30 days, depending on the state, but everything that they owe you, everything that workers' comp owes you, will be paid to you in your first check. So if that's 10 days later, or 26 days later, or 21 days later, you're going to get it all from the day that it was first reported and approved. You will have to stay on top of these things. I would love to say that every HR department and every company and every owner and manager will do it for you. But the truth is, they're already consumed with the day-to-day business, with other things happening. Now, in a big event where multiple employees from one company have been injured, either shot or they fell while trying to escape, back injuries, whatever it might be, when you have a large group, now that company will have to either have a dedicated person doing all of the work for this one incident, or they will have to subcontract that to companies who do take over case management and medical. They'll check on medical bills, medical payments, so on and so forth, to make sure that everything is being done in a timely manner. All right, so let's go over this real quick one more time. Workers' compensation will cover all medical bills, hospitalization. If you're hospitalized for a month, they're going to pay for it 100%. They're going to cover transportation by an ambulance, helicopter, or any other medical evac. They will cover 100% all medicine, 100%. If you have to go through rehabilitation, they will cover that 100%. If you need a walker, a wheelchair, whatever it might be, any type of apparatus as part of your rehabbing, they will cover that 100%. Medications, rehab, any type of equipment necessary for rehab, they're going to cover all of the medical 100%. As far as your paycheck, workers' comp will cover between 60 and 70% usually in most states, maybe a little bit higher in some states. That will all begin within that time frame that their state allows, usually 10 to 30 days after the approval of that claim. One of the other things that's not talked about, but in an active shooter incident or any traumatic situation that you experience as an employee while on the job, Workers' comp will also cover other areas, and that may include psychological, seeing a psychiatrist, a psychologist, PTSD. Can you imagine being involved in this type of situation, running for your life, hiding for your life, bullets whizzing by you, gunshots for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, seeing your coworker falling and dead? PTSD and trauma is 100% part of your injuries, and workers' comp should cover for any medical facility or doctor that you have to go to be able to cope with a situation like this. Now, in some cases, I've heard, I have not experienced, but I've heard that PTSD claims are sometimes rejected by workers' comp. And unfortunately, that's another situation where we're going to have to talk about on the second half of this, and that is getting an attorney involved. And again, it's not something that we recommend as long as workers' comp is taking care of the claims. But when they refuse to, then you may have to get a law firm involved. Workers' compensation, like I said, it's a relief. It comes directly from the employer. They file that claim. Their insurance carrier processes the claim, just like if you had a traffic accident or any other type of situation where you have insurance. And they should turn around very quickly, and get that approved for you. There should be no doubt, no discrepancies, no nada, nothing at all. As an employee, there should be nothing to worry about. You were injured in a shooting, you're going to be eligible for many, many different things. Let's say that you're injured permanently, and the Social Security Administration is where that you're going to go to next. You're going to have to file for Social Security disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 is also in play here because it prohibits employers from discriminating against employees based on their ADA-recognized disability. So if you don't want to collect Social Security, but you have been injured on the job, you could come back, and they would have to let you. They would have to try to accommodate you. But again, there's a lot of variables. I'm not saying that you're guaranteed a job, but more than likely, under the ADA, you would be good. One of the other things that's a federal law that you should be aware of is the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA. Now, a lot of times when you hear this, you think about pregnant women, pregnant employees who take 6 months off after giving birth to their child. But the FMLA Act gives all eligible employees the right to take protected leave for a qualified medical reason. And again, this could be a serious health condition. It could be an injury that you're recovering from, that active shooting incident. It could be post-traumatic stress disorder. It's covered. Medical treatment for a gunshot wound or mental health struggle, they're equal. Depression, post-traumatic stress disorder is covered under the FMLA federal law. And I believe that workers' comp will also cover anything that you need for the PTSD or depression. It was all related to something that happened on the job. There are numerous state laws that bar employees from retaliating against employers from retaliating against employees if you're not being taken care of by their insurance and you make complaints to OSHA, to any state or federal organizations. You can continue working there, but they cannot terminate you because you are complaining that you're not being compensated for the injuries, your medical bills are not being paid, you are a protected employee under this situation. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, was created for situations like this. They're created to mandate certain standards, regulations for employee safety, and in this case, where it was an active shooter incident, they will definitely be there to investigate. If you have any issues whatsoever with a job-related injury or a health or safety concern, 1-800-321-6742. That's 1-800-321-6742, a federal agency. And here is something else that you as an employee need to know. All employers must notify OSHA within 8 hours of a workplace fatality or within 24 hours of any work-related inpatient hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye or a limb or other certain conditions. This means that if you or any employee goes to a hospital after a workplace injury and you're admitted, they have to notify OSHA within 24 hours. As an employee involved in an active shooter incident, you will also be covered by, like I said a moment ago, numerous other state and federal laws. It is important to understand your rights, and so many employees do not. When I come back from this break, I want to talk about the unfortunate situation of when employees are not compensated at all or not fairly, or when employees are permanently disabled from an active shooter incident or other job-related injuries, and companies have attorneys and so forth to stand against the employee and try to point fingers and try to make them the blame, which does happen way too often. The fact is, when you're injured on the job, you should be taken care of, compensated monetarily, all of your injuries taken care of through insurance. You should not have the worries. You and your family should not be struggling to survive because you were hurt on the job. And we'll talk more about that and some of the other things that play into workers' comp, such as negligence, drug use, alcoholism, and so forth. We'll be right back. You're listening to On the Legal Side.
Cancer is a common disease. In the United States, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men will develop some type of cancer in their lifetime. Some types of cancers are more common in certain racial or ethnic groups than others. Lung, breast, prostate, and colon cancers are the most common cancers. Anyone can get cancer at any age, but the risk goes up as people get older.
There was the explosion, and I remember just opening my eyes, and it got both of my legs. I had surgery after surgery, and what's going to happen next? The Wounded Warrior Project said, look, brother, everything's going to be okay. 3 months from now, 4 months from now, a year from now, you'll be fine. I don't know if I would be as well adjusted as I am now if it wasn't for them.
To learn more, call 1-877-832-6997 or visit woundedwarriorproject.org.
I heard about a shooting involving a 3-year-old girl over the summer. My daughter Riley is that age.
There was a point when I felt that I was going to die.
My parents used to always say a bullet doesn't have a name on it.
Someone put a bullet in the back of my 14-year-old son's head.
The gun should never be an option.
We're Americans. We don't have to live like this.
We can all make a difference.
In the United States, 88 people die of gun violence every day.
We can end gun violence.
beside. She's my blue jean baby with big green eyes. She's my blue jean baby with long brown hair. When the boys see her, they just stop and stare. Just to see her flash of that winning smile. A country boy would walk a country mile. Got no worries, she ain't got no care. She's my blue jean baby with long brown hair. Hey, operator, give me 911.
You're listening to On the Legal Side, a production of Blue Ram Media Group and Private Officer International. I'm your host, Rick McCann. When we're talking about work-related on-the-job injuries or deaths, there are situations that occur where either the workers' comp insurance company or the employer or both sometimes will point the fingers at the employee to try to make them responsible so the claim is denied. And this is an unfortunate but realistic situation that happens far too often than it should. There are times when employees are negligent or responsible, but in an active shooter incident, that's not one of them. Let me repeat that. If you get hurt on the job, you're climbing up a ladder and you go too far up and you fall down, you might be negligent, or what the law, a tort law says, culpable, at least in part. You're intoxicated. You come to work under the influence of marijuana or alcohol or another drug, and you are driving the forklift and you wreck and you get injured. You might be negligent, more than likely you will, especially when they take a drug test and they find out that you're under the influence of some type of narcotic, even marijuana in states where it's legal. But in an active shooter incident, a mass casualty situation, that doesn't apply. There's no negligence. There's no contributory factor that the employee contributed to a mass shooting, to an active shooting at their workplace. So that's ruled out. You can forget about it. Insurance companies might try to find some wiggle room there to make the employee at fault. Hopefully not. But if anything happens where you are not compensated, where your medical bills in an active shooting case is not taken care of, then you only have one other choice, and that's to call a law firm, an attorney. And under the tort law area of civil law, you would have to file a lawsuit. Now, there are several people that can be sued in many of these active shooters. So let's start off first with the fact that it was an employee of the company. Your coworker was the shooter, and he killed a number of people and injured others. And he wasn't killed by police. He's still alive and he's in custody. Well, you could sue him to begin with, but you're probably not going to recover any money. You could sue him in a personal injury lawsuit for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a number of other possibilities, other causes of action. But suing the employee probably will not get you very far, if any place at all, because he doesn't have insurance and he's on his way to prison for the rest of his life, more than likely. So who do you sue? You're left with the employer. Now, in states that have workers' comp insurance, it's going to be very difficult, to be honest with you, to sue an employer in this type of case and win, especially when that state has workers' comp. But there are cases where employers, even with workers' comp, are found liable. If they didn't have workers' comp, that was in force at the time. In other words, maybe the premium had lapsed. They didn't pay their insurance. And so workers' comp wasn't in play during that day of the event. Maybe they were negligent. we're really going to have to work hard to prove that one. But there are some cases where employers are at fault. They are negligent. And here are the cases. In case law, you have to prove, go back into case law and look at other cases and prove these variables to show that the employer bears some of the contributory factors, some of the responsibility. If the employee that was involved in the shooting was known at the time of hiring to be a violent person, to be a felon who was not supposed to have a gun, to be a felon who had violent crimes, robberies, sex crimes, aggravated assault with weapons, serious felony drug record. We all want to help. We all, as employers, we all want to give people a second chance. But the fact is, there are certain type of crimes on a person's record that sends up red flags. And if the employer did not acknowledge those or did not do a criminal background check or knew certain factors about this person but hired them anyways, that could be negligence. It could put them in the hot seat. Here are some other possible avenues to prove a case against the employer. The employer knew the employee was violent, had a record, the employee had situations occur on the workplace, and supervisors, managers, and company owners didn't handle it, didn't terminate him, didn't reprimand him, didn't counsel him, didn't change up certain factors that would help to avoid a recurrence. Now you might be able to, show negligence on the part of the employer. The other avenues that you might be able to go is that this was a foreseeable event. A foreseeable event. The employee was a felon. The employer should know that felons cannot have or be in possession, own, or otherwise be near a firearm. And yet he sees a gun in the employee's vehicle one day as he's getting into his vehicle next to the employee. He ignores it, doesn't think another thing about it. Well, that might prove negligence, even possible criminal negligence, even possible criminal charges in that case. Foreseeable. It would be a foreseeable situation to know that someone's carrying a gun who's not permitted to carry a gun, who is violent, who has a violent past. We know his criminal history, and yet we've hired him, and we know he's had some problems already within the company, and we now know he's got a gun in the car. That's a foreseeable situation. They were negligent in not calling police. They were negligent in not firing the person. They were negligent in not reporting a felon in possession of a gun. They were negligent. That would be a good case to argue in court that you're probably going to win. Another situation is the employer is in a real bad neighborhood. There's a lot of shootings there, a lot of gun violence. Murders happen within several blocks of the company. People always shooting nearby. Could you prove a case in that situation that the employer was negligent because it was a high crime area, it had a lot of gun violence, shots could be heard almost daily, people getting shot and killed, but he remained there in that neighborhood? That might be a harder case to prove, and yet it could be proved that he did nothing. He didn't put up security cameras. He didn't put security alarms on the building and kept the building locked. He didn't hire security guards. He didn't hire off-duty police. he didn't make an attempt to put any type of security at all to help to secure his employees, his property, to make things safer. Now you have a case. Is it a winnable case? It might be. Unfortunately, there are times when employees have to go this route because they're not being taken care of by insurance. You know, I've heard of cases where security officers have been shot and seriously injured. The company that they worked for did not have insurance, and they were left, the security officer was left with the debt and with the injuries and sometimes even disabilities. When we're talking about violence, when we're talking about positions where violence could happen against the employee, it is a critical situation when we need to really be considering the security of our employee. But when an employee does get injured, we should be doing everything within our power to aid and assist that employee. As an employer myself, I don't want to think about being sued by my employees, and thankfully I haven't been. But I try to do right by them. I try everything within my power, always have, to make sure that their safety and their security is priority. The bottom line here is when it comes to employee rights and employment rights as they pertain to workplace violence and shootings, there's not a lot of laws that directly point one direction or the other. And so many times attorneys have to get creative. They have to look at case law, previous cases that have come before the court. They have to look at what the employer did and didn't do to assist the employee. They have to look at certain statutes within the state. You see, one of the things about states like California and other states, they're beginning to realize that the federal government doesn't have as many laws in place to protect the employee as they do to protect the employer. So they began mandating their own laws, their own ordinances, and other states have followed suit. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Illinois all have various laws now on the books to protect employees from numerous situations that would be questionable whether it was an employment or employee right under federal law. The laws that are normally talked about on the federal level don't really clearly state what the employer's obligations are in an active shooter or mass shooter. I'm sure that's going to change because of all of the on-site active shootings happening across the country. But even when laws do apply, the employee will, they usually have to prove that the employer was negligent or violated the state mandate or didn't have workers' compensation insurance in place at the time of the shooting. You see, if the employer doesn't have WC insurance in place, then that's it. You can sue. You don't have to prove anything. The employer already was negligent for not having the required workers' compensation insurance. That would have solved the whole problem. That would have taken care of the employee injuries. That would have compensated for lost time at work. That would have compensated for lost wages. That would have compensated for any medical needs, prescriptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many small companies cannot afford insurance. Workers' comp and general liability continue to go up. And many companies, they have to decide whether or not to make those payments or make payroll. And so sometimes those premium payments do lapse. And unfortunately, an employer could get caught in one of these situations where a late night shooting or a security officer on duty is shot. Last year there were almost 200 security officers that died on the job. About 83% was from shootings. There was a number of others that was from COVID, and COVID has been classified by OSHA as a workplace illness. Many times, those companies have insurance, and hopefully most of the time. But there are times when they don't. So in the aftercare of a mass shooting, we have to think about the employees first. We shouldn't be, as an employer, thinking about, oh, my gosh, my insurance premiums are going to go up now. I've got 16 employees that have been injured. I've got 3 that have been killed. I've got 7 who have been killed, 15 who have been killed. Oh, my gosh, my insurance. Oh, I might lose my business because of this. We can't think about that right now. We need to think about the employee. How are we going to take care of them? Do we have our workers' comp in full force right now? Let me immediately have human resource immediately, day one, begin the process, filling out the claims, notifying our carrier. Get this ball rolling as quickly as possible. And we need to be at the side and on the side of the employee in these events, not trying to figure out ways of trying to skirt around what the law is or what our insurance is supposed to provide in this situation. Overall, I know that private security companies in general do a good job of providing that workers' comp and having general liability. It's a condition of regulatory licensing. But I want to know, really, do we go above and beyond what's required? Do we really make sure that we follow up with the employee? As an employer, I can't imagine having to respond to my office for a mass shooting and people that I care about are injured or killed. Employers, after an incident, even where one person is injured, you shouldn't just drop the ball and say, okay, well, he'll be taken care of by workers' comp. We'll send him a fruit basket. How about visiting the employee at the hospital? How about picking up the phone and calling the family? Hey, I'm so sorry about George. Looks like he's going to be all right, though. He's got some time. He's going to be on the mend. But we're going to take care of everything. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. We're going to be right there for you and with you. How about lightening the load? How about being empathetic? You see, without employees, there'd be no employers. These are tough conversations to have. But from the legal standpoint, there are certain things that the law specifies that the employer has to do. But there are other things that common sense and humanity says you should do above and beyond the law. That's going to conclude this episode of On the Legal Side. I hope an active shooter case incident never happens to your workplace. But if it does, I pray that you'll take care of and stand by your employees. Until the next time, be blessed, stay safe, and we'll see you back on the radio. Have a great week.